The best way to learn programming is to make simple projects. If you want to learn Flutter basics step by step by implementing project, you are in the right place. Today we are going to implement this project step by step so that you can easily learn the basics of Flutter in the UI section. In this project, we will have two pages. Both pages have modern design. In the implementation of these two pages, we will use the most basic Flutter widgets and you will learn how to use fonts, libraries, images, icons, widgets, and so on. I promise you that by implementing this project, you will feel the change and learn the basics. So let's get started. We have a Discord server where we are trying to bring all Flutter developers together and build active community. If you have a question, you can ask and get your answer. The server link is placed in the video description, so you can join. Main file is the entry point for a Flutter application. It typically contains the main function, which is the starting point for every Dart application, including Flutter apps. This file sets up the application and its widgets. When you create the Flutter project, this file is created for you, and this is the content of the main file. I want to delete the contents of this file and move forward step by step. Import statement. This line imports the Flutter material package, which provides a wide range of pre-designed widgets and themes that follow material design principles. Here we have main function. The main function is the entry point of the application. It calls run app with a widget which becomes the root of the widget tree. We also have myApp class. MyApp is a stateless widget that builds the material app. The material app widget is a top-level widget for a material design app. It includes several properties like title, the title of the application, theme, the theme of the app which defines the colors and styles used throughout the app, home, the default route of the app, which is a widget, usually a scaffold, that is displayed when the app starts. Now I want to set the home page of our application here. First, I'm going to create a new Dart file called home. Here, what do we want to do? We want to create our home page. How can we do this? We have to create the home page widget. But how? To do this, we have two ways, using stateless or stateful widget. Let me tell you what's the difference. Stateless widget is immutable, meaning that once it is built, it cannot change. This widget does not maintain any state. It simply renders a UI based on the properties it is given. Stateful widget can change during its lifetime. It maintains mutable state that can be modified based on the user interactions or other factors. The state object associated with the stateful widget holds the mutable state, and the widget can be rebuilt whenever the state changes. I wanna use stateless because we don't need to change the state for now, but later we will need to use stateful. I will tell you where. So here, let's create stateless called homepage. If you enter SL, VS Code will suggest you stateless, so you don't need to write all the codes. Here we have build method. The build method is a crucial part of stateless and stateful widgets. It describes how to display the widget's UI by returning a widget tree. Flutter calls this method whenever it needs to render the widget. The build method takes a build context parameter, which contains information about the location in the widget tree where this widget is being built. Let's go back to the main file. Here, for home property, we need to set the home page. Now, the first page of our application is the home page. Okay, great. Now, start your emulator. And press the F5 button to run the application. This is our home page. Now, the first thing I want to do is remove the red debug banner from here. To do this, we must set the value of debug show checked mode banner to false in material app. Awesome. Let's go back to the home page. The first step to make the home page is to return a scaffold inside the build method. Scaffold is a widget that provides a framework for implementing the basic visual layout structure of a material design app. It is one of the most essential widgets in Flutter, as it helps create the visual structure and layout of your application. Here's an overview of its primary components and functionalities. Scaffold has a bar that is the top part of the screen, which typically contains a title and may include actions such as buttons and menus. We also have body, the main content area, which typically contains most of the app's widgets. Inside the scaffold, we can use drawer, a slide-in menu that can be used to navigate within the app. We can also use bottom navigation bar, which is a bar at the bottom of the screen used for navigation between major sections of the app. The scaffold also has float in action button, a circular button that floats above the content and is usually used for primary actions. Alright, now let's start coding and implementing the home page. I wanna start by changing the background color of the page. This is very easy. Scaffold has a property called background color. We just need to set its value to white. To access the colors, just write colors dot and then select the desired color. That's it. The next step is to implement this blue box. As I explained, we must use the body property in the scaffold to display the content on the page. Now, the value of body must be a widget. We want to implement this blue section. In Flutter, we can use container to create a space or box. Container is a fundamental building block that acts like a box to hold other widgets. We have an error here. To fix this error, we must delete the keyword const before scaffold. I will tell you what const is later. As you can see, the color of the container is blue. To change the color of the container, we can use the color property and use colors to select the blue color. But the color of the container is not basic blue. The hex code of this blue is equal to this. In order to apply the hex code, it is enough to use the color class and first put 0xff inside it and then set the hex code. That's it. Now we need to set the height for the container. We can use the height property and set the value we want. Amazing. It's so easy, right? Okay. What is our next step? The next step is to display hide text. But how can we display something inside the container? To do this, we need to use the child property in the container. Child is the primary widget inside container. First, let's look at the structure inside the container. As you can see, the inside of the container consists of 3 parts that are located in a column below each other. In Flutter, in order to place the widgets under each other, we must use the column widget. Column is a widget that arranges its children vertically. Each child of column is displayed below the previous one. So, value of the child in the container must be column, and we must implement 3 sections inside of the children. Now, we want to implement hide text inside children. We can easily use the text widget and write the desired text. But as you know, we should be able to style the text. What can we do? We can use the style property and the text style widget. Now, inside the text style, we can use different properties such as font size. Now the width of the container is equal to the width of the children. In order to increase the width of the container and make it width of the entire page, we must use double.infinity. When you want a widget to take up all available space, you can use double.infinity for its width or height. In the next step, we have to move the text to the center of the container. Actually, we have to put the column in the center of the container. To do this, we can use the MainAxisAlignment property. MainAxisAlignment is used within column to determine how its children are aligned along the vertical axis. The column widget arranges its children vertically, and main axis alignment defines how much space each child should take up and where they should be positioned along this axis. Well, as you can see in the picture, we have to use dot center. Okay, let's try this one. Let's change the text color to this hex code and also increase the font size. Amazing. In the next step, I want to change the font of the application. These are our fonts. The first step is to put these fonts in this project. So inside the project, we have to create a folder called assets. And then inside this, again, we create a new folder called fonts. Now we put the fonts in this folder. In the next step, we have to define these fonts in the project so that our project can recognize this font. We have to do this in the pubspec file, so let's open this file. First, I'm going to delete all the comments to make it clean. In the Flutter section, first we need to create an asset section called fonts. Now inside this, first we have to set the name of the font family. Now again, after the font family, we use the keyword fonts and then define the path of the fonts with the weight and also the style, like this. I define the rest of the fonts in this way so that we don't waste time. And now let's save using Ctrl+S to update the pubspec. And in the last step, we have to define the font of the application. To do this, open the main file and define the font family of the application using the font family property in the theme and inside the theme data. That's it. Now let's go back to the home page. We have to display "Let's find your top doctor" text. This is also very simple, exactly like the previous text. So we use the text widget again and write the text we want. And we can go to the next line by using \n, and also in the style, we should increase the font size. And we also need to change the font weight to bold. For this, we can use the font weight property and set it to W600. Okay, great. We have a problem here. As you can see, the widgets inside the column are not aligned. To solve this problem, we can use the CrossAxisAlignment property. CrossAxisAlignment property in a column widget controls how the children of the column are aligned horizontally along the cross-axis within the column. Cross-axis alignment can have different values such as start, end, center, scratch, and baseline. So as you can see, we must use start. To fix these blue lines, just click on Quick Fix and then click on Adding Const. The const keyword is used to create compile time constants. This means that the value of a const variable is determined at compile time and cannot be changed at runtime. Using const can improve performance and reduce memory usage by ensuring that the same instance of a constant value is reused throughout the application. Using const in widget trees can significantly improve performance by reducing the need to rebuild widgets unnecessarily. Now I want to create a space from the sides. In order to create a space from the sides inside the container, we can use the padding property. Here we can use different widgets such as only, all, or symmetric, which are almost all the same. I use all and set its value to 16. This means to create a space of 16 pixels from all sides. Alright, let's move on to the next step without wasting time. Our next task is to implement the search field. This is also very simple. To have a text field in Flutter, we can use the text field widget. Now, let's change the style of the text field. First of all, we need to change the background color of the text field and change it to white. To change the style of the text field, we must use the decoration property and the input decoration widget. Now here, first, we have to set field to true, and finally, we should set the field color to white. Great. Okay, as you can see, we need space between the text and the search field. In order to create space between two widgets, we can use SizedBox and set the space to height. We even have to create space between the two upper text so that we can use the SizedBox again. That's it. So, what should we do now? Now, we have to remove the border of the text field because we don't have a border for the text field in our design. To change the border style, we can use the border property and the outline input border widget. Now inside this, first we have to set the value of border side equal to none. In the next step, we must apply the radius. For this, we must use the border radius property and set its value to border radius.all. Now inside this, we can use different widgets. I use radius.circular and set the radius value. Awesome. The next step is to display the text search here inside the text field. In the text field widget, we have a field called hintText that we can use and set the search here text. And we can change the text style by using hint style, like this. And finally, we have to implement the search icon in the text field. For this, we can use prefixIocn in the text field. Now, we can use icon widget for this value. Inside the icon widget, we must use the icons class and select the desired icon. We can also change the color of the icon with color or change the size of the icon using size. Okay, great. Implementation of the text field is finished. Now to finish this blue box, we only need to display this notification icon. This is very simple. As you can see, the notification box is in front of the high edit text. In Flutter, to be able to display two widgets in a row, we must use row widget. Row is a widget that displays its children horizontally in one single line. This widget is useful when you need to align multiple child widgets next to each other horizontally. Similar to how a column would be used to create vertical layouts. So we have to wrap HighAD inside the row widget like this. Now here, after the text, we have to create the notification widget. For this, we need to create box. We can use a container and set the same height and width to make it square. Now we need to change the style of the container. For container style, we should use decoration and box decoration widget. Now first we have to set the color. As you can see, the color of the container is white with low opacity. To set the opacity, we can use the opacity method, which value must be between 0 and 1. Looks great, okay. Now we need to have radius. To set the radius, it is enough to use the border radius property and the border radius circular widget, like this. Well, as you can see, there is a gap between the box and the text in the design. I mean that the text is at the beginning of the row and the box is at the end of the row. To create space between two widgets in row, we can use MainAxisAlignment. The MainAxisAlignment property in row widget determines how the children should be placed along the main axis. It controls spacing between and around children. In our case, we can use space between. And in the last step, we have to display the notification icon inside the container. The icon is SVG file. For using SVG in Flutter, we have to get help from the package. For this, we can use the Flutter SVG package. pub.dev is a repository for Flutter and Dart packages. Okay, great. Now click on copy button to copy the name and version of the package. Let's go back to the project. To install the package in the project, we must define the package in the pub/spec file. So open the pub/spec and paste it in dependencies and finally press Ctrl+S on the keyboard to save and install. Awesome. Now this is our SVG file. How should we use it in the project? This is exactly like fonts. First, we need to create a new folder in assets called vectors. And then we put the SVG files of the project in this folder. Now we have to define these files in the project exactly like fonts. So first we need to define the assets section in pub/spec. Now here we set the path of the vectors folder. This line means that all the contents of the vectors folder are defined in the project and we can use them. Great, now we can use the Flutter SVG package and the notification icon file in the project. Okay, now let's go back to the home page. Well, as you know, we have to use child to display the widget inside the container. Now in child, we have to display SVG file. So we must use the Flutter SVG package. To use the SVG package, it is enough to use the SVG picture class. This error tells us that there is no SVG picture. To fix this error, we must import the Flutter SVG package. Just click on Quick Fix and then Import. Now, this class has different methods such as Asset, File, and Network. Because the SVG file is inside our project, we must use the Asset method. Now inside this, we have to set the path of the SVG file like this. Amazing, as you can see the icon was displayed. We have a problem here. The size of the icon is not its original size and has been enlarged to the size of the container. To solve this problem, we can use the fit property and set its value to none. To make the color of the box look like the design, we can set the opacity value to 0.1. Okay, fantastic. Finally, the implementation of this part of the home page is finished and it was a big step to learn Flutter. Congrats to you, well done. Okay, let's go ahead. In the next step, we have to implement the categories section. But before that, I want to clean the home page. What I want to do is to make the code of the blue container a method so that the body is not crowded. Just click on the light next to the container and then select extract method and then select the name for the method. For example, I select header and then press enter. Now, as you can see below, we have a method called header that returns the code of the blue section. Also, the header method is set in the body. This is so great. Now let's go ahead and implement the categories section. The first question is, what should we do in the body now? As you can see, the header is set in the body, so where should the categories section be placed? Let me guide you. Let's assume that the page consists of 3 sections: header, categories, and list of doctors. So we have 3 sections that are below each other. So what should we use? That's right, column. We have to use column in the body. So let's wrap the header inside the column. Now, just like the header, I create a new method called categories so that the body section is clean and the sections are separated from each other. Return type of this method is widget, so inside this method we must return a widget. As you can see, the categories sections consist of 2 parts, the text and the list of categories. So we must return a column here as well. Now we can change the return type of this method from widget to column, but there is no difference at all. Okay, great. Here, first we must display categories text. So we can use text, it's simple, I'm sure you have learned this by now. And let's change its style. We use bold for font weight and also increase the text size. In order to be able to display the categories method, we have to put the method in the body. So I do this. Great, as you can see we have categories here. As you can see the categories text is spaced from the top and the left. To create space, we can wrap the text inside the padding. Now here, we use only and set the space for the top and left, like this. It seems that the text is too big. I want to reduce its size and weight. Okay, great. We have another problem here. As you can see, the text is not on the left side. What do you think is the problem? Well, as you know, we now have a column in the body, which has 2 widgets, header and categories. And these 2 widgets are not aligned. What do we use to align the widget in the column? That's right, cross-axis alignment. So here we need to use cross-axis alignment and set its value to start. Okay, great. In the next step, we have to display the list of categories. In Flutter, in order to be able to display a list of widgets, we must use the ListView widget. So in categories, I use ListView. But we have to create list of categories. So we have to use builder methods in ListView. We have two methods, ListView.builder and ListView.separated. Both of them are exactly the same, but in separated, we can create space between the items. So it is better to use separated. Here we have three required parameters. Item builder is a function that builds the items in the list. It takes two parameters, the build context and the index of the item. It should return a widget. Separator builder is a function that builds the separators. It also takes the build context and index of the separator. It should return a widget. And the last one is item count. Item count is the number of the items in the list. Okay, now let's make the list of categories. How do you think we can make this? If we look at the design, we can see that the information of the items is not the same. The icon and the background color of the box are different. So how do you think we can implement this? Should we check with if, for example, if the index of item is 0, show this item, or index of the item is 1, show this item? No guys, this is the wrong way. We should use model instead of this way. To create category model, first I create a folder named models. Then inside this, I create a file named category. Now we have to write only Dart code in this file, and there is no mention of Flutter. Okay, great. To create model, we need to define a new class called category model. Now we have to define the parameters. We need two parameters. The first is the path of the vector. So I define a field of string type called vector. We need another parameter to determine whether this item is selected or not. The type of this parameter must be boolean. If it is equal to true, we will change the color of the box to blue. So I define another field called isSelected. Now we need to create the constructor of this class so that we can create different instances of this class. Now how should we use this model? As you know, we have a list of items which information is displayed through this model. So we need a list of this model. The first thing we need to do is create a method called getCategories that returns a list of category model. Now inside this method, first I'm going to define list of category model called categories, which we will add the categories to this list, and finally we will return this list. Okay, great. According to the design, we have 4 categories that we should make an instance of category model and add it to the list. First of all, I put the SVG files of these categories in vectors. Now inside this method, I create 4 categories and add them to the list. The isSelected value must be true in dentist and false in others. And finally, we must return the list of categories. Okay, great. We are done here. Now we can use this method. Let's go back to the home page. Here, first we need to define list of category model called categories data. What should be the value of this list? That's right. We need to use the getCategories method and make the list. Okay, great. Now let's move on to ListView and use categories data. We can set the value of item count to the length of categories data like this. In separator builder, we can return SizedBox and set width inside it to create horizontal space between items. Now we have to implement the items in the item builder. Well, as you can see in the design, we can easily use container. The shape of the container should be circular. We have to do this in decoration. In box decoration, we can use the shape property and set the box shape to circle. For the color of the container, we need to check if the isSelected value is equal to true, its color should be blue. Otherwise, its color should be white. We can use the question mark to check, like this. As you can see, we have an error here. This error tells us that the list view must have certain height. Okay, great. We can easily wrap the list view inside the sized box and set the height. The list we made is vertical, while our list should be horizontal. We can easily change its type to horizontal by using scroll direction property and axis. Also, to align the characteristics and the list, we must set the cross-axis alignment equal to start. You know this. Okay, great. We also need to set the shadow for the container. To add shadow to a container, we need to set box shadow property with a list of box shadow objects. Now we have to use the box shadow widget. In this widget, there are various properties that we can use and set the shadow we want. Also in shadow, we should check that if is selected is equal to true, it will be set with blue color, otherwise the current shadow will be set. Amazing, we are moving forward very well, guys. In the next step, we need to create space for the list from all sides. For this, instead of wrapping the list inside the size box, we can wrap it inside the container and use the margin property in the container and set the space from all sides. I also need to remove the size box that I had created for this space. And finally, we have to increase the space between the items like this. Okay, great. And in the last step, we are going to display vectors. We have already done this in the implementation of the notification icon. In the container, we use child, and in the child, we are going to use SVG package and SVG picture widget, like this. Amazing, this is so great, guys. Now in the next step, when I click on any item, I want it to be selected, which means that the isSelected value will change from false to true. So that means we have to change the state and rebuild the widget tree. In order to rebuild our page, we must use setState. First of all, we need to be able to click on the container. In order to be able to click on a widget, we can wrap it inside gesture detector. Now here we can use the untap function, and when we click on the item, we implement the action we want to be done inside the untap. Okay, so what exactly should we do here? Here we have to set the isSelected value of item to true, like this. Okay, now it means that if I click on the item, it should be selected. So why did nothing change, guys? The reason is that, as I said, we have to rebuild the widget, and for this, we can call setState. But as you can see, we can't use setState. Why? That's right, because the home page widget is stateless. So we have to convert it to stateful. If you remember, I told you the difference between stateless and stateful at the beginning of the course. In order to be able to rebuild the widget must be stateful. So let's do it. It's very easy. Click on the light next to the name of the widget and select Convert to Stateful. Here we go. Now our widget is stateful. Let's go back to untap. Now here we have to call setState after changing isSelected to true, like this. Okay, now I wanna try again and click on the items. Wow, this is so great. As you can see, we can select the items. But we have to change our code a little so that when the item is clicked, the previously selected item will be unselected. To do this, it is enough to use loop and unselect all items by setting isSelected to false. Okay, great. Now, as you can see, there is no problem. Okay guys, let's go ahead. The next part that we need to implement is the list of doctors. This is very simple. The first thing we have to do is create model for the doctor, just like the categories. First, we have to create model, then display list of these models. Okay, so let's create a new file called doctor in the models folder. Now inside this, like category, we need to define a new class called doctor model. Here we can have different fields such as name, image path, color of image box, list of specialties, and score. We also need to create the doctor model constructor. Now I'm going to create a method called getDoctors that returns a list of doctor model. Guys, this is exactly like categories, so I won't explain much here. First, we define a list of doctor model inside method. Before we start creating the models, first I want to put the images in the project. The format of the images is PNG and I don't want to put them in the vectors folder. So I create a new folder called images in the assets and I put the images inside this folder. One thing we shouldn't forget is to define this folder in the pub spec exactly like vectors. Okay, great. Now let's create models and add them to the list of doctors and finally return the list. Now let's go back to the home page and use this method. First of all, we define a list of doctor model called doctors data. We create a list of doctors using getDoctors and set them in this list. Great, now we have the list. In the next step, we need to implement a design. First of all, like the previous ones, I'm going to create a method called doctors that returns the widget. Well, as you can see, we have to display list. What widget do you think we should use? That's right, ListView.separated. We should set the item count equal to the length of the doctor's data list. For the separator, we set SizedBox with the height that created the space between the items. In the item builder, we also need to create container because we need something like a box. Before we start the implementation inside the container, let's put the doctors widget in the widget tree. Okay, now we have an error here. This error tells us that the list must have a certain height. But because our list is vertical, we cannot set a specific height because we may have 20 items or 30 items and so on. So what should we do? In the list view, we have a property called shrink wrap. If we set its value to true, our problem will be solved. When shrink wrap is true, the list view will take only the necessary space to fit its children. Now I'm going to set height for the container. As you can see in the design, the container has shadow, so we have to set the box shadow. As you know, we have to do this in the box decoration and using box shadow. Okay, great. We also need to set the radius for the container so that we can use the border radius property. Also, the color of the container should be white. And now let's create a space from the right and left. There is a property called padding in the list view that we can use. Because we want to create space only from the sides, so we can use symmetric and set value for horizontal. As you can see, it seems necessary to create space from top. We can do this by setting the value for vertical. Now let's go to implement inside the container. Okay, as you know, we have two parts inside the container. The first part is the image and the second part is the text and the other elements. And it is quite clear that they are in the same row. So we can use row in the child. Now, first we have to display the image. So I create a container. As you can see, the container has radius, so I set it. And also the color must be equal to the color we defined in the model. Great. We can use a property in the box decoration to display the image. In box decoration, we have a property called image, which value should be decoration image. Now here we have a property called image. For this, we can use asset image or network image or file. Because the image is local and it is in the project, we must use asset image. Now inside this, we have to set the path of the image we defined in the model. Great, just we have a problem, and that is the image is in the center, while it should be at the bottom. To solve this problem, we can use the alignment property and set its value to bottom center, like this. Great, now let's go ahead and implement the second part. As you can see in the second part, we have three elements that are in one column. So we have to use column widget. First of all, we need to create space for the column. So I wrap it inside the padding widget. Now we need to display the doctor's name. So I use the text widget and then use the model and set the doctor's name. Next, we have to display the specialties of doctor. For this, again, I use the text widget and then the model. Note that the specialties are in the form of list, so I display the first index of the list. Well, as you can see, now we have two texts that are not aligned. In order for the widgets to be aligned in column, we must use cross-axis alignment and set its value to start. And finally, we have to display the score. Okay, I have a question for you. As you can see, the score consists of two parts, the score and the star icon, which are in the same row. So what should we use? That's right. We need to use row widget. Now, first we have to display the icon, which we can use the icon widget and then select the desired icon using the icons class and also change its color. And then we use the text and display the score. The score type is double, so we have to use toString to be able to display score in the text. Okay, great. What should we do now? Now we should be able to put the score at the bottom of the column. It means that the score should be away from the upper widgets. To do this, we can easily use the spacer widget before the row. Spacer is a widget used to create flexible space in a column or row layout. Awesome. And finally, I want to create a space between the score and the star icon. So as you know, I can use SizedBox and set width. So guys, we made it, and this is so great. Well done. I promise you that by implementing this page, you will learn the basics of Flutter. Okay, let's go ahead. We also have a page that we need to implement, and that page is the detail of the doctor. The first thing we need to do is to transfer the user to the detail page when clicks on the doctor's card. The first step is to be able to click on the container. As we did before in the selection of categories, here we have to wrap the container inside gesture detector. Now on tab, we have to navigate to the detail page. To navigate, we must use the navigator. The navigator manages a stack of root objects and provides methods for managing the stack, such as push and pop. To navigate to a new screen, we use the navigator.push method. Inside push, we have two parameters named context and root. Context is the build context of the current widget. For root, we can use material page root. Material page root is a subclass of page root in Flutter, used to create a root that uses a platform-specific animation to transition between screens. It provides a way to navigate to a new page in your app with standard material design transition. Now we need to return the detail page in the builder. So let's create this page. First of all, I'm going to create a folder called pages. Inside this folder, I'll create a new file called detail. I transfer the home file to this folder as well. Now in the detail file, exactly like the home page, we need to create a detail widget. Well, as you know, we have two types of widgets, stateless and stateful. Here I'm using stateless for now. So I'm going to create a new widget called detail page. Now let's go back to the home page and return the detail page in the builder. Now, if I click on one of the doctors, we will be directed to the detail page. Awesome, great. As you can see, we are in the detail page and this is working very well. Now, we don't have anything on the screen, that's why the black screen is displayed. First of all, to implement the page, we must return the scaffold inside the build method. Alright, according to the design, the first thing we have to do is to implement the back button. It is very simple. The question is how to put it on the top and left side of the page. For this, we can simply use the app bar widget in the scaffold. This is one of the basic widgets in Flutter. For starting the implementation, I want to change the background color of the scaffold to white. Okay, now we need to change the background color of the app bar to white as well. Here, we have a property called background color that we can use. In the next step, I want to display the title of the page, I mean detail doctor. For this, we can use the title widget, which value must be a widget, so we can use the text widget. Now we need to display the title in the center of the app bar. This is also easy. It is enough to set the value of the center title property to true. And now let's implement the back button. We can use the leading property to display the widget on the left side of the app bar. We can use any widget here. I want to use the icon button because it is exactly like a button. Here we have two parameters named onPressed and icon. onPressed defines the callback function that gets executed when we tap on the button. And we can implement any widget in the icon. I want to use the container. The container has shadow and radius, so I'm going to set it. In order for it to be displayed correctly, we need to set the height for the app bar using the toolbar height and set the width for the leading using the leading width. Okay, awesome. Now we need to display the back arrow inside the container. So we can use icon in the child. And finally, we have to go back to the previous page when we click the button. For this, we can use the navigator and call the pop method. Okay, now if I click on the button, we will go back to the previous page. Great, let's go ahead and implement the rest of the design. Now we have to display the doctor's information in the body. Well, as you can see, the page consists of 4 sections and they are located in one column. So we must use columns in the body. As you can see, we need doctor's information in this page. We need to pass the model from the previous page to this page to access the doctor's information. We can do this through the class constructor. So here, I'm going to define an instance of doctor model and then required it in the constructor. Now on the home page, when we want to navigate to the detail, we have to pass the model like this. Now we can use information on the detail page. Okay, great. Now we can start implementing the information. In the first step, we have to display the basic information. We did this on the previous page. So I want to get help from the previous page code. But first of all, I will create a new method called info. Then I copy the codes from the previous page and then return in this method. Now instead of using doctor's data and index, we should use the doctor model we defined. Now let's put the info in the column and see the result. As we can see in the design, we don't need to have shadow in the container, so I'm going to remove it. Now, Flutter suggests to us that since you are not using any of the container properties, it is better to use SizedBox instead of container. Alright, as you can see in the design, we need to create a space from sides in the body. For this, we can wrap the column inside the padding. In the next step, we need to display the biography in the info. Okay, as you can see, the biography is at the bottom of the basic info, so we must use the column in info. Before implementation, we must add the biography field in the doctor model, so I'm going to do this. Okay, great. Now let's display the biography. It's very simple. We have to use 2 text widgets like this. Okay, now let's create a space between the elements using SizedBox. Also, to align the elements, we must set the value of cross-axis alignment equal to start in column. Okay, great. Guys, we already implemented this widget, so I won't explain too much so that you don't get bored. Okay, let's go ahead and implement the specialties. First, we need to display the text of the specialties, which is very simple. Then we need to display the list of specialties that we need to use the ListView widget. We learned how to use the ListView on the home page. We must use a ListView.separated. Item count should be equal to the length of the specialties list in the doctor model. Also, scroll direction should be set to horizontal because as you can see in the design, the list is horizontal. Now in the item builder, we only need to use text and display value of the list based on the index. If we reload, we will have an error because the horizontal list must have a certain height. So I wrap the list inside SizedBox and set the height. And finally, to display underline, it is enough to use the decoration property in style and set its value to underline. Let's go to the next step. In the next step, we need to implement calendar. It is exactly like the categories that we implemented on the home page. So it is very simple. We have only one problem. We don't have calendar data. For this, like the previous data, we must create model and then set list of calendar model as a field in the doctor model. Okay, let's make the calendar model. Because it is related to the doctor model, so I'm going to make it inside doctor model file. First, I create class named calendar model. We have two fields named day number and day name. So I define these and also create the class constructor. Now in the next step, we need to define list of calendar model in the doctor model. And now in the models we created for the doctor, we have to add the calendar field and create list of calendar models like this. Now we can use this on the detail page. We do exactly the same as categories. First, we need to define list of calendar model, which value should be equal to the calendar list in the doctor model. But as you can see, we can't use doctor model here. To solve this problem, we can change the class from stateless to stateful and do this in the init state. Init state is a method in Flutter that belongs to the state class. It is called when an object for a stateful widget is created for the first time. This method is an essential part of the widget lifecycle in Flutter, where it is used to initialize data that may depend on the build context or the state itself. Now we can start create calendar section. First of all, I'm going to create a new method called calendar. Here we have two sections, calendar text and data list. So we must use column. Before starting, I put the calendar inside the widget tree. Now I want to display the text. Again, we need to use the ListView.separated to display calendar, just like categories or specialties. In the item builder, we can use container. The shape should be equal to the circle. We also need to set shadow. In child, we should use column and first display day number and then day name like this. Now we need to make the calendar boxes selectable. Before that, we need to add the isSelected field to the calendar model so that we can use it to determine whether the day is selected or not. So I will do this. I won't explain because we did this in the categories. Now here, first I check with isSelected and change the color of the text, box and shadow. And finally, we have to wrap the container inside the gesture detector so that we can click on the box. And inside the on tab, first we need to set all the items to false, and then I set the isSelected value of the selected item to true. And finally, we shouldn't forget to set a state so that we can rebuild the widget and update UI. Okay, calendar implementation is finished. Now in the next step, we have to implement time, which is exactly like calendar. So I do it myself so that the video is not boring. You can check the source code. Right, I implemented time, which as I said, it is exactly like calendar, and there is no difference at all. Finally, we have to implement the button. For this, I'm going to create a new method called bookButton. We can use material button for the button in the Flutter. Before starting the implementation, let's put it in the body to see the results. Because the button should be placed at the bottom of the screen and have the maximum space from top, we can use the spacer and then place the book button. Now we can set the height in the button. For width, we should use min width because I'm button has full width, so I use double.infinity. To remove the shadow of the button, we must set the elevation value to 0. We can use the color property for the color of the button, and to set the radius, we must use shape and then use rounded rectangle border, and inside this, we have to use border radius. And finally, we use the child property and text widget to display the text. That's it. So guys, we made it. Congrats. Good job. I promise you that if you implement this project step by step with me, you will learn the basics of Flutter, and I'm sure you will feel the change. So please practice and don't just watch the video. I hope you enjoyed the course. See you soon.